Rising inequality, social division, and political polarization have created a tense situation in the U.S. People are deeply divided on multiple issues like economics, race, gun control, and immigration, all compounded by the pandemic. But has the country been here before? How do the volatile events of today compare to periods of unrest in U.S. history? Dr. Judith Ginsberg is a professor of history at Villanova University and the author of several books on the U.S. Civil War. We thank you so much for taking some time today to share the important historical perspective, Dr. Ginsberg.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
It's not the first time Americans have been immersed in political, social, and cultural conflict. But with the pandemic, bipartisan unrest, civil rights actions, many are saying this moment in time feels unprecedented. But from a historian's perspective, is that really true?
Like everybody else, I feel that way too. I sometimes shake my head and think I can't imagine a moment in history that is as bad as this moment in history. What are we living through that we actually can go to the past and learn something from? And I guess, my answer to that question is that we have seen all of the things you just listed in your question, the political unrest, the calls out for racial justice, epidemic disease, are really, really hard, arguments and disagreements about the future of the country. All of those things have come to us in this country before, not necessarily all at once. And I think that's certainly part of that feeling that we have that we just can't sort of catch our breath from one crisis to the next. All of your viewers, and I'm sure, you yourselves have thought about this, we've reached back quite a number of times over this past year to 1918 with an ongoing worldwide pandemic. And the world, is still in the middle of a war, and those sort of overlapping crises for people who lived through 1918, I'm sure felt unprecedented, and people felt that they just couldn't imagine dealing with one of these on their own, much less two of them at the same time. And of course, the next year in cities throughout the United States, there were race riots. So you had the sort of similarly overlapping sense of crises that really strained all of our institutions at once. And it would take years for Americans to get over those crises. I feel like it's going to be the same thing for us as well. It's going to take us many, many years to get over these overlapping crises.
Well, part of the difference today is that we've got social media throwing fuel on the fire. U.S. gun and ammunition sales have surged in 2020 in fear of that outbreak of civil unrest. People are scared. From your perspective, are people more militant than in the past?
So I thought a lot about that question as well, of course. And I would just add to our list of sort of things that make this worse, that throw flames on all of these simultaneously fires, is, to my mind, they're also sort of, they're augmented by what, in my opinion, has been an absolute failure of leadership to get out of these crises. We're just seeing that in the starkest terms. I again share the fear of what I see as growing unrest and growing, disenfranchisement that we see, or just the sort of polarization that we see. And I can't help but go back to the period that I study as well. We've had one civil war in the United States. And of course, it began when a group of a group of Americans decided that they couldn't accept the outcome of an election. That's what the U.S. Civil War started as, and a group of elite white Southern slaveholders decided that the outcome of an election was not something that they would, that they would accept. Except in that case, it wasn't a rash decision. It was something that they had actually been planning for decades. So when, this upstart political party ran somebody for president in 1860 and he won, for them, this was sort of the crisis that they knew was coming. And so this very well-organized group of people who had, again, been rehearsing all of this, decided that they really, they had two options. They could accept, or at least that's what they thought, right? They could accept the outcome of this election and try to fix it from within, or they could try to take down the country from the outside. They could try to destroy it from the outside. And of course, as everybody knows, they chose the latter. So when all of that had happened in his first inaugural, Lincoln looked at Americans and said, this is a democracy, right? We live in a democracy, and in a democracy, the will of the majority, it has to prevail. Is that what we're committed to as a country? Right? Are we willing to be patient and let the sort of political process work its way out? And if not, then really what we're saying is sort of, we're not making this decision just for us. We're making it for the world, because people are watching us, right? Are we willing to sort of take down our democracy and potentially take it down for, aspiration countries elsewhere who aspire to democracy? That's what he said in his first inaugural. And of course that didn't solve the problem that day. And it would take 4 years of fighting and a lot of death. Numbers that we're seeing again now. I mean, we're seeing, we're 750,000 Americans died in the Civil War. We're about a third of the way to that number now with the number of Americans who died with COVID. And we are at that moment now, like Lincoln was, right, in the middle of the war at Gettysburg, when he looked out and said, this isn't, this is the death toll here is such that it has to have a bigger purpose. It can't simply be to solve the problem about whether or not, a state can secede, right? It has to be bigger. And so he says at Gettysburg, we have to commit ourselves to a rebirth, a rebirth of this nation, and that we rededicated ourselves to equality and to a new birth of freedom. And he's sort of decided that this kind of death, American death, had to have that bigger purpose. And that's the Constitution that came out of the Civil War. It was a new Constitution, and it was about treating Americans with dignity, all of them. So that's why I think, when we do see the other side of this crisis that we're at, it will not just solve the problem of sort of the Electoral College or these smaller questions. It has to be, we have to look at ourselves and say, where is our democracy going? Is democracy what we have continued to dedicate ourselves to? And if so, we will have to do more than simply sort of survive to the next election. We will have to rededicate ourselves to a different kind of country and a different kind of constitution.
Well, the Civil War has become central to current political and social unrest, with one side lauding Civil War figures and the other side seeking to remove monuments in their honor. How important has the Civil War become to U.S. identity?
I think it remains very, very important in complicated ways. What became complicated is that the side that lost the war began to win the memory game, and began to win the game about sort of the story that Americans would coalesce around. The losing side, right, sort of won the messaging contest. So what we're looking at now is, at this moment, as statues are coming down and or people are trying to stop them from coming down, is really more of an argument or a disagreement about that sort of memory part of it, because those statues, though nominally about figures who came from the Civil War, Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, all of the figures that we've sort of seen Calhoun is among them as well, whose statues are now in question. They're all figures from the Civil War. Those monuments were, of course, erected at the turn of the century, when that civil rights legislation that we just talked about had been reversed or had been so crippled that it was meaningless. So those statues were always about defeating civil rights, and much less, and sort of the figures of the Civil War era were useful in that regard. So the fact that we're now having this conversation is actually a bright spot in all of this darkness, as far as I'm concerned, because it means we can then look around and say, who are we and who do we want to be, and how is that reflected in the statues that we have in our public places?
Well, from a historical perspective, what will the new administration need to do to cool the tensions that are arising? Or is the answer outside of the government administration?
Well, I always think a lot of history is always a good thing. So I think that, I think the administration, and I'm confident they will do so, will surround themselves with people who know how all of these, how to solve these problems, and know that, again, that many of them we can draw from much more recent history to solve. President-elect Joe Biden actually went to Gettysburg and made a speech that was, that talked about these kinds of things that I just mentioned about Lincoln, about sort of saying, let's look out there and think about all these Americans who we've lost, and how are we going to try to make something, make the nation better for them, make their sacrifices, have some meaning, maybe not for their loved ones today, but for generations to come. So I do feel like that's really important. And I saw, that's something I've always liked about my period, is that, that we had, that Lincoln rose to the occasion. And remembered that this country, remembered where this country had come from, remembered that, that our aspirations to be, a beacon of hope in a world that didn't have many democracies at the time, that Americans wanted to be that democratic beacon for other nations. And also, I think that I hope that that not only the administration, but they're able to convince many Americans that we need to stick in, and we need to dig in for the long haul here. It's not going to be, we're not going to fix these things in 4 years.
Well, we can certainly hope that in this polarizing climate, that cooler heads will indeed prevail. Dr. Giesberg, thank you so much for providing a historical perspective today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been good spending the time with you.